Today, we're going to dig into a word that you hear all the time, security. But it's about so much more than what you might think, more than just soldiers and borders. We're going to explore what it really means in the world we live in today.
I mean, think about it for a second. You hear politicians talk about national security constantly. It gets stamped on files and spy movies. It's used to justify all sorts of things. But what are we actually talking about when we say that?
And here's the thing. A lot of the time, that phrase is used to shut a conversation down, right? It's like a trump card that implies something is too secret, too important for the rest of us to even discuss. Well, that's not what we're doing here. We're doing the exact opposite. We're opening this whole thing up. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. At its most basic, stripped-down level, security just means being free from threats. But, life is full of threats, big and small. So we need to get a little more specific than that. So for our purposes, security isn't about, every little danger or problem. It's about the really big ones, the kind of existential threats that could hit a society's core values so hard that it might never, ever recover. And this question right here is really the heart of the whole issue. When we say we're protecting core values, whose values are we talking about? Are we protecting the state, the government, the institutions, the land? Or are we protecting the people living inside that state?
For a very, very long time, the answer to that question was crystal clear. The traditional, old-school view of security was all about protecting the state from military attacks from the outside. Period.
This classic way of thinking is super straightforward. The thing you're trying to secure is the state. The main threat you worry about is another country's army. The values you're protecting are things like sovereignty and borders. And your number one tool for the job? Military power. This traditional mindset gives you a pretty clear playbook. Step 1 is deterrence. Basically, having a military that's scary enough to make other countries think twice about attacking you. Step 2 is defense. Being able to fight back if a war does break out. Then you've got managing the balance of power, so no one rival gets too strong. And finally, building alliances, because there's strength in numbers. And this state-first approach really took hold after World War II. For the world's major powers, the idea of an internal threat seemed, kind of distant. They saw themselves as stable, unified countries. The real danger, the one that kept them up at night, was external. It was the other side in the Cold War. But the world changed, and this single number shows you just how much. Today, more than 95% of all armed conflicts are civil wars. They happen inside a country, not between two countries. And that fact alone makes that old state-focused way of thinking feel, pretty out of date. This new reality forced a major, fundamental rethink. I mean, if most wars are happening inside borders, and if sometimes a government is actually a threat to its own citizens, then is protecting the state always the same thing as protecting the people? A huge turning point came in 1994 with this landmark report from the United Nations. And it said something powerful. It basically argued that for decades, we'd been so obsessed with the security of nations that we completely forgot about the security of ordinary people just trying to live their lives. And that idea, it was a game changer. It gave a name to a whole new field of thought. The conversation started to shift away from the old idea of state security and toward this new, much broader concept, human security. So, if we're now talking about protecting people instead of just states, what exactly are we protecting them from? Well, suddenly, the list of threats gets a whole lot longer. This new field of human security pretty much split into two main schools of thought. The first is called freedom from fear. It focuses on protecting people from direct violence, like war and crime. But the second, much broader view is called freedom from want. And it argues that things like hunger, disease, and poverty are just as deadly, and in fact kill way more people than bullets and bombs. When you start to think that way, you realize some of the biggest security challenges we face don't involve armies at all. They're global issues like terrorism, human rights abuses, pandemics, environmental collapse. All things that can threaten human life on an absolutely massive scale. And the scale of these threats is just staggering. To give you just one example, by 2003, the HIV/AIDS epidemic had infected an estimated 40 million people around the world. This wasn't just a health problem. It was a security crisis that was tearing apart entire communities and economies, especially in Africa. Or take a look at this. This chart shows another huge challenge, displaced people.
When conflicts or disasters force millions of people to flee their homes, it creates refugee crises that don't just stay in one place. They ripple across the globe, and they become a security issue for everyone.
And that brings us to the next really logical conclusion. All these new threats, pandemics, climate change, terrorism, they don't stop for border checks. They don't respect our maps. And that means the old model of every country for itself, well, it just doesn't work anymore. I mean, you can't fight a virus with a fighter jet. You can't drop a bomb on poverty or climate change. The old tools of security are pretty much useless here. The only way to even begin to tackle these truly global threats is by working together, through international cooperation.
And that also means the team of people who work on security has gotten a lot bigger. It's not just governments and armies anymore. It's international organizations like the UN and the World Health Organization. It's NGOs like the Red Cross. It's even businesses and powerful individuals.
So, to wrap it all up, our whole idea of what security is has gone through a complete revolution. It's evolved from this narrow mission of protecting a state's borders to a much, much bigger mission, protecting the lives, the well-being, and the basic human dignity of people wherever they are. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. In this totally interconnected world, where a problem on one side of the planet can become a crisis for everyone, what do you think is the single biggest security challenge that your generation is going to have to face?